John Calipari is not at Kentucky anymore. When he was hired, he had almost won a championship at Memphis. He was a missed free throw away, and he was expected to win multiple championships at Kentucky. Well, instead, he basically just created a AAU team of incredible players and sent them on to the NBA. And I think his goal was to have his players make $1 billion. And I think they have, actually, which is insane to think about. But is Tennessee actually in a tougher spot with Mark Pope there than with John Calipari?
Yes. They missed John Calipari at Kentucky. Now
wait. Tennessee
misses John Calipari being at Kentucky. Now, because let's break down what happened with John Calipari, Dave. Let's fully put our cards on the table here. What happened in college basketball is what's happening to college football now, and it happened a little bit earlier because of the transfer portal, which is this. The transfer portal and certain other coaches, once other coaches follow Calipari with the one-and-done philosophy and did, the Nike connection, found other connections. Like, okay, let's give an example. Coach K. Why did John Calipari have such a monopoly on the one-and-dones in the first half of the 2010s? The Nike connection, right?
Yes.
Well, after that, though, you had Coach K coaching the Olympic team multiple years in a row, and you had other college basketball head coaches as assistant coaches on those Olympic teams multiple years in a row, building their own connections. What happened? John Calipari lost his monopoly on one-and-dones. So he was still the best, but he wasn't lapping the field. Once he stopped lapping the field, once he went from like 8 5-stars and having a 2-deep roster to maybe a couple a year, he stopped getting past the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
And it got very noticeable. And his deficiencies as a head coach were already known. Ask anybody in Memphis. They thoroughly... Look, he was going to take the Kentucky job no matter what, but Dave, that Memphis title basketball loss, that's some of the worst coaching in the last 2 minutes of a basketball game I think I've ever seen in my life. Where Bill Self's not even a great coach, but he coached circles around Calipari in the last 2 minutes. And then he wins one.
Good. I mean, I wouldn't sell Bill Self short.
I think Bill Self's a great recruiter and develops talent better than Calipari. But I'm not about to sit there and think that, like, I like his high-low motion offense and it prepares guys for the NBA, but I still question how great of a coach he is. But he gets the talent. But anyways, Calipari goes to Kentucky, wins one national title with Anthony Davis, flames out with John Wall, flames out with Brandon Knight. I mean, and then here's the thing that I think hurt Calipari the most on the recruiting trail. 2013, 2014. So he wins a national title in 2012. The next year, his one and dones don't work out. I think that was the Michael Kidd-Gilchrist year? You guys correct me. I think that was that year, maybe the Nerlens Noel year, but they go to the NIT. The one and dones never mesh. They go to the NIT. They don't even make the NCAA tournament. The year after that, they back in as a 7 seed. That's when they had the Harrison twins. They back in as a 7 seed, but they get all the way to the national title game. Calipari does something he never done. He convinced every one of those one and done players to come back for a second year, and then he got another one and done class in 2014. So we enter 2014, 2015, Dave, thinking this Kentucky team is the most talented team of all time. They should win it easily. And Calipari goes undefeated in the regular season, undefeated in the SEC tournament, gets to the Final Four. He's about to be the first coach to go undefeated in a basketball season since Bobby Knight. And what happens? With Frank Kaminsky down low going up against Karl Anthony Towns, Frank Kaminsky wins the battle because John Calipari doesn't know how to go down low to his big man and gets out-coached massively. That wrecked his reputation on the trail to a certain degree. And you started to see the number of players committing reduce. And Tennessee was starting to take ownership over Kentucky. Rick Barnes kind of owned Calipari at Kentucky. So yes, because of that, I think Tennessee misses Calipari at Kentucky now because Calipari was never going to have Kentucky at the level they can be at. Arkansas, Calipari is having Arkansas at Arkansas a school. Calipari's got them at a very high level relative to what Arkansas can be, right? Because he can get those guys and they'll be good. But he kept Kentucky from reaching its full potential towards the end. And I think the fact that Tennessee has to play Kentucky twice and Kentucky at their full potential is dangerous. Yes, long-term, Tennessee's going to miss John Calipari at Kentucky because they're going to miss that coaching incompetence.
I think you're being too kind to say that he kept them from reaching their potential. I mean, they were nowhere close to. I mean, really, with the players you mentioned, and there's a bunch more. I mean, is winning one championship about the worst that you could do with that collection of talent?
Yes, particularly with that 2014-2015 team. That's the one that I can't get over. And, in the mid-2010s, Dave, do you remember the SEC kind of branded, like, Calipari and Nick Saban as, like, contemporaries? Like, Calipari is the basketball SEC legend, and Nick Saban's the football SEC legend. Nick Saban should have been like, I'm offended by that, and how dare you guys ever put me in the same category as John Calipari? Like, John Calipari is... I used to give him a break to say, okay, one and done guys, it's hard to get them to mesh well. So you got to kind of coach them, and, you're going to be limited on what you can do, and you always have them in. But then I started to watch how he actually coaches as a tactician, and he doesn't coach well as a tactician at all. I mean, he rolls the ball out and lets him play.
No, he does. He's very Jerry Green-esque.
He is. He is. The only thing Calipari does is he convinces the players to somewhat play within a system that they may not otherwise do. I'll give him credit for that. He, I guess, convinces them to play a little bit of selfless ball. I think maybe because they already know that they're going to be number one, first round draft picks, and it doesn't really matter what they do at Kentucky, so they're willing to do it. But that's the one thing that Calipari does really well. Kind of like a Phil Jackson. I don't think Phil Jackson had I don't care what people say, the triangle wasn't some fancy scheme that helped.
Well, Tex Winters created that.
Yeah. Like, I think what Phil Jackson did better was, like, with Shaq and Kobe, he managed their egos well. He was a good, like, psychological guy. He got Dennis Rodman to maintain his focus when he was on the Bulls. And so that's what Phil Jackson does well. But, yeah, John Calipari is not a great coach. He's not. I mean, it's similar to, I'll just say it. In reality, John Calipari is the Gino Auriemma of men's basketball. Gino Auriemma, just women's basketball recruits stay all 4 years.
Yeah, I'll give you another thing to ponder for a moment. The Nike thing, see, everybody talked about Nike is going to make Oregon a success, and they're a football dominant power because they're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Nike can't do that because they provide clothing and they do business with other schools. So sure, Phil Knight can give them a little bit of cash, but he can't just dump all the money on them and expect for the other schools to be okay with that.
No, not at all. And let's talk about how the Nike thing happened. So I don't know if you guys know, but it's Memphis is known for FedEx, obviously, but one of the underrated giant hubs that Memphis has that employs a lot of people is Nike has a giant headquarter base in Memphis, funny enough. And it's in South Memphis on Shelby Drive. When Calipari took the Memphis job in 2000, he immediately, and I mean immediately, established a connection with everybody in that Nike factory. And that built him a connection to every Nike camp all the way up to Phil Knight. And that's how he got all those recruits at Memphis. That plus doing things like hiring Milt Wagner as an assistant coach for a year so we could get DeJuan Wagner. So put it this way. Calipari's smart. As Calipari did the legwork to be able to get these one and done guys. I'll say this for him. I think you would agree, Dave. He identified where he has recruiting advantages at each school, and that's how he took advantage of them. But that's all he did. That's all he ever did.
So who's the better coach? Going back to our poll question, John Gruden or Lane Kiffin? Lane Kiffin, 79% of the vote versus 21%. Does that surprise you? That surprises me a little bit. I thought there would still be some Tennessee distaste for Lane.
Yeah, it does surprise me. I thought Lane was going to win, but I thought it'd be like 60-40. 79, like people like really think Lane's a great coach. I mean, Lane Kiffin, though, we got to remember this. I think he's impressed me with what he's doing at Ole Miss. The mystique of John Gruden really wore off even before the emails leaked, honestly, because he wasn't that impressive at Oakland or in Vegas with the Raiders. Wow, I see your new poll question, Dave.
What do you think
Better
about
coach, Gruden or Calipari?
Who are you taking? Gruden or Calipari? Vote now. Please hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, do that.
Probably Gruden. By the way, you know my favorite thing that Calipari, you know how good of a scam artist Calipari is, Dave? You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Calipari actually named his offense, the dribble drive. That's a scam to pretend like it's an actual offense at all that he's coaching up, okay? Because the concept of the dribble drive is, I kid you guys not, the fundamentals of the dribble drive is the player who takes the ball, drives to the basket, and either goes up for a layup or kicks it out to somebody open. That's not an offense. That's not running an offense. That's all. And he literally was like, I developed the dribble drive offense. I'm like, you mean you developed just giving players the ball and telling them to go score? I mean, that's like if Doug Collins was like, I developed the Michael Jordan score offense, which, when all Doug Collins did was, I mean, it's the same with the Jordan rules. They acted like that was fancy. And I forgot who was it that said it. He's like, no, it's just we cold cocked him every time he drove to the basket.
Yeah, that was the Jordan rules. I mean, it would be as physical with him as possible. I would have to say Gruden, because I think winning a Super Bowl is more impressive than an NCAA basketball tournament.
Well, Gruden is not a bad, and also remember this: John Gruden did develop, and I guess we could say he understands what we might call he's an early adapter of the Power Coast offense, which Jim Harbaugh won a title in. Which, for those who don't know, that combines the Bill Parcells I-form offense, where you run, but it uses the spread principles of what Bill Walsh does. Because typically, Dave, there's some Bill Walsh spread principles. You worked in shotgun and spread the field. But yeah, you do you do a single back, but your passes are all short passes. Gruden actually was one of the early developers of that offense. And
you still haven't answered the question. Are you taking Gruden or are you taking
as a coach, Calipari? Gruden? Yeah, I'm taking Gruden's a better coach. Gruden knows ball better than Calipari knows basketball. I mean, I just now I'll say this. There is a gap even in like knowing ball from like John Calipari to Josh Pastner, who did not know basketball to save his life as the protege of Memphis.
Most curious hire that I have ever seen.